Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to Collider Mailbag, the show here on Collider Video where all we do is take your mailbag questions. My name is John Campia. I am the senior producer over here at Collider Video. And Mailbag, for those of you who may not know, is a much more casual, laid-back show. We're just sitting around, just going to take some emails, talk movies and entertainment and all that kind of stuff. And I even have a big announcement to make. I actually have two announcements to make. So, announcement, and both of these announcements have to do with television. Now, ever since we moved over to Collider, which we are having a blast at being a part of the Collider crew, people have been asking me, well, now that you're not just at AMC, and we are so thrilled that AMC are still our partners, they're still sponsors of our show, and we're very grateful for that. We love working with AMC. But now that we're over here at Collider instead, are you guys going to talk about television at all? And the answer to that has always been, yes, we are. Give us some time to get some things together. So, with that being said, we still have our main show still Collider Movie Talk. And no, we are not going to talk television shows on Collider Movie Talk because the name of the show is Movie Talk. We are also not going to be doing a TV talk show covering TV news. Why? Well, it would just be kind of impossible because there are like 100 shows on TV. And then we're picking and choosing which shows we're actually going to cover on TV talk. You know, on Movie Talk, we talk about the big comic book movies, but we also talk about the smaller films. We talk about the dramas. We talk about the rom-coms. We talk about all that kind of stuff because, you know, 3 movies open up a week. We can talk about a lot of stuff. With television, there's like 100 TV shows. And therefore, if we're not talking about a show that you watch, you're not interested in TV talk. So we're probably not going to do a TV talk. But that does not mean we are not doing TV, because we are doing TV. So the first thing I want to mention is that starting next weekend on Mailbag, not on Movie Talks Mailbag, but here on the weekend Mailbag shows, we are going to start taking some television questions if you have some questions about your favorite TV shows. Now, because it's me hosting it and you're asking me the questions, I'm not going to be able to answer questions about TV shows I don't watch because I wouldn't have any kind of an answer for it. But we are going to start taking some television show programming questions here on the weekend mailbag shows. So if you got a question you want on the weekend mailbag show that's television related, feel free to kick it on in. The second announcement we have is the big announcement, actually. You know, we may not be doing a TV talk news show per se, but we are going to do TV, and we're going to do it in a big way. Today we are announcing, although I put it on my social media yesterday, which is why you should be following me on Twitter or on Facebook at John Campia, because sometimes, quite often, I'll announce early on my social media. But we mentioned this yesterday on social media. Me and Frosty over at Collider.com, we both mentioned this. Collider Video is launching a television recap show network, or after show, if you will. We're calling it the Recap Show Network, where we will be taking a television show, and then right after that show, a new episode airs. We're going to have a crew of people breaking down, dissecting, analyzing, talking about, geeking over that week's episode. So as many of you know, I used to do an Arrow after show, had a lot of fun with the Arrow after show, and we are going to get into television doing it that way. Now, there is obviously a lot of television shows, and this is an experiment for us. We don't really know if you guys want us doing this, so we're going to test it first. And we're going to test it, and we thought, well, how many shows should we start with, though, then, if we're going to test it? Should we start with 1? Should we start with 2? Should we start with 8? And, you know, we all thought that 8 might be too much for us to start with. We're just getting our feet on the ground. We want to see if we can handle it and how much we can do, and we want to see if you guys like it or not. So we decided, me and Frosty were talking, as well as some people at Complex and other team members here at Collider Video. We started talking, well, how many do we want to start with then? And we decided that 8 might be a little bit too many. But 2 or 3 might be too few. So we decided we are going to launch in September and October with 6 shows, 6 recap shows, or 6 after shows, if you will. We are going to start with on our Collider Recap Network. And here are the shows we're going to announce right now for the first time. the shows that we are going to be covering. Now, we wanted to mix it up a little bit. We wanted to, number one, really be aware of what our audience, our existing audience already watches, but then we want to throw in one or two things that maybe our existing audience doesn't watch yet. So it's a little bit of a blend of the two. So here we go. Here are the 6 shows that we are launching our Collider Recap Network with. Now, I'm building the suspense. I should say, if the Recap Network works, and if you guys like it, and if we do it okay, and we're comfortable doing it, then 6 shows is going to expand. And maybe we'll do 12 shows and 18 shows or 24 shows. But for now, we're starting with 6, and to see if you guys like it and if we like doing them, and we'll see where we go. So here are the 6 shows. I promise, now we're getting to them. Here are the 6 shows that we are launching the after show or the Recap Network with. And we're starting with a brand new show, Supergirl. The brand new show on CBS. This is the only show that we're doing that is a brand new show. Launching. But one of the things that we are aware of, there are so many comic book shows out there right now, but they pretty much, other than Agent Carter, who's not a superhero per se, none of the shows have a girl as their main lead. And we thought, we want to have one of those. We want to celebrate that. And so we decided that Supergirl would be a good fit for us starting off. We think the show is going to be a hit. And so we wanted to have Supergirl, and we wanted to have at least one show that was a brand new show. And so we decided on Supergirl. So Supergirl's the first show. The second show is not a brand new show, but is going to be Stephen Amell's and the CW's Arrow. Arrow is going to be making an appearance. The Arrow fan base is a passionate fan base. Stephen Amell is a guy I am a huge fan of personally. I know Frosty at Collider.com is also a big fan of Stephen Amell. And so the second show that we are going to be doing on our Collider Recap Network is Arrow. The third show that we are going to be doing is a monstrously and surprisingly hit popular show with a passionate fan base, Empire. The way this show just took off in its season 1, I don't remember anything quite like it since the first season of Lost. I mean, it just became a hit for the first episode with a passionate following, a passionate fan base, and we thought, yep, that's one we should be doing. We think there are people who are interested in talking about Empire after every episode. So the third show that we're going to be doing is Empire. All right, let's move on to the fourth show we're doing next. And the fourth show is going into season 3, and it's Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I love Clark Gregg. I am a big Clark Gregg fan myself personally, and I know Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has a very loyal following. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it is fair to say it is the main Marvel Cinematic Universe TV show that there is. And so Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the fourth show that we're going to be doing. Now moving on to the fifth show. The fifth show we're going to be doing is actually one of my favorites, and that is James Spader's The Blacklist. I just adore this show. I love this show. James Spader has turned into one of probably my top 10 favorite characters. His character Reddington has turned into probably one of my top 10 favorite characters on television. The cast has a great chemistry, all that kind of stuff. And so it's The Blacklist. And so now we move on to the final show of the original 6 we're going to be doing our recap network with. And this won't catch any of you by surprise, knowing me. It is The Flash. The Flash, which is just a great, surprising show. I thought the idea of doing a Flash television show was a horrible idea. I thought it was a terrible idea. I didn't think it was going to be any good. I didn't think people were going to watch it. And then lo and behold, it actually ends up being a really fun, special show. And so, just to recap once again, the 6 shows that we are going to be starting our Collider Video Recap Network with are Supergirl, Arrow. Then we're moving on with Empire. Also, going into its 3rd season, The Shield. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I should say. Also moving into its 3rd season is The Blacklist, and going into its 2nd season is The Flash. And so those are the shows that we're going to be doing. Hope you guys are interested in joining us. We are actually right now, by the time you watch this video, if you go to my Facebook page or my Twitter, you'll find a link and some instructions on how, if you live in the Burbank area or somewhere close by, and you're interested in being on one of these shows, we are actually casting for these shows right now. We have started the casting process for people to be on these after shows. Each show is going to have a 4-member panel, and we are really looking forward to putting together some great panels for people to talk about these shows that they love so much. And so if you got any questions about it, just drop me a note or whatever. Leave a question in the comment section. I'll see if I can get around to them. But that's our big announcement, guys. And also, yes, that show that I mentioned that I'm going to be doing regarding television is still happening. The Should You Watch It? It's basically a show about me talking about, each week I'll talk about a different show that you can binge watch. That is, maybe you've heard that Daredevil was great, or maybe you heard that show Sons of Anarchy, which is now done, but you can watch on Netflix. Should you watch that show? Maybe we'll talk about Justified or Deadwood or the Breaking Bad or whatever. There's lots of great shows that have come and gone or are still on the air, but now they're a few seasons in. Should you go back? Is it worth it for you to go back on Hulu or on Amazon Prime or on Netflix and binge watch those shows? Each week I'll be talking about whether it's a show you should be watching. So yeah, thank you so much for indulging me with that big opening announcement stuff. And now let's move on to the first question of the day. Actually, you know what? No. I'm not ready to go on to the first question of the day. This is something that I should probably address, because I started getting I got a whole bunch of emails last night. Yesterday on Collider Movie Talk, we talked a little bit, we took a mailbag question about, should studios basically release everything that they show at conventions, like at Comic-Con, or Disney just recently had D23. Should studios instantly release whatever they show to people at Comic-Con or show at D23? Should they then, in a very timely manner, either right away or within the first few days, should they be obligated to then release that footage to everybody and to the general public? And Mark, myself, and Schnepp, we all had the same opinion. No, they shouldn't feel obligated to do that. And our basic argument was that, look, there's something special about going to Comic-Con, or there's something special about going to D23, or there's something special about going to Star Wars Celebration. And if the studios decide that we want to treat the people who came to this thing with something special that's going to be just for them, then we should be allowed to do that. It's also important to note that a lot of times they'll show stuff at these conventions that they would never dream about just putting out to the public. One of the things that we mentioned was at D23, Kevin Feige, since they didn't have any Doctor Strange footage because they haven't started shooting the movie yet, he said on stage, but we're at D23, so we got to show you guys something. And they took all the still art, they took a bunch of the production art from the upcoming Doctor Strange and set some music to it and kind of made a trailer out of it, and they showed it to the audience, and it was great. But that's something they would never dream or want being put out to the world or being put out online. It's not what they want the majority of people's first impressions of Doctor Strange to be. They want that to come later. But they decided that they wanted to show something special for the people who came to D23. And I got to tell you guys, I am just floored by the sense of entitlement that a bunch of people have. Yeah, I want it too. If you're going to show it to them, you should show it to me. Basically, the attitude was this, if I don't get to have it, they shouldn't get to have it. And, I just don't understand that mentality. I just don't get the mentality. Now, some people would then wrote to me and Schnepp and Mark and said, well, that's easy for you guys to say because you get paid to go to all these things. I haven't been in Hall H, which is where they show all the big stuff at Comic-Con. I haven't stepped foot in Hall H in over 5 years. I just haven't gone into Hall H in 5 years. Just haven't. I haven't gone to a Star Wars Celebration in at least 10 years, since it was in Indianapolis. I went to this D23, but that's just because it was a 45-minute ride up the highway. That's why I went. So I was at D23. But I generally don't go to these things. I don't go to these panels. So the whole thing's like, well, I'm only saying that, no, they should keep that stuff special only because I get paid to go to them. No, I wasn't there either. So I hear about all this stuff that goes on in Hall H, and I hear about all this stuff that goes on at these other conventions, and I just think, you know what I think? When I hear that somebody who was in Hall H, like Dennis stood in line for 6 hours to get into Hall H at Comic-Con this year. I'm not standing in 6 hours for anything. Anyway, he stood in line for 6 hours to get into Hall H, and then he told me, him and Wendy started tweeting me some things that they got to see. And did I think, well, if I'm not seeing it, they shouldn't get to see it either? No, I thought, that's awesome. I'm so thrilled for those people in Hall H who get to see that stuff. That's awesome. And I get to hear them talk about it, and I get to hear a report on it. And, you know, I just think there's this mentality that we have, this really immature mentality, that if I don't get to have it, then nobody should get to have it. And I just don't subscribe to that theory. I just don't subscribe to that at all. Now, some people will say, well, John, you know, it's not fair to those of us who couldn't afford to go. Well, affording it doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, even if everybody in the world could afford it, that hall could only hold 7,000 people. So, I mean, that's not the issue. I mean, I can't afford to own a Ferrari. Does that mean I should be entitled to have a Ferrari since other people have Ferraris? No. And I just don't have a Ferrari. I can't afford it. And I wouldn't want to make the life decisions I would need to make in order to afford it either. So do I look at a Ferrari and say, he gets to have a Ferrari, I should get to have a Ferrari too? No, I just go, hey, that's awesome. That dude gets to have a Ferrari. I'm happy for you. I'm so thrilled for you. But a lot of people, I find, with this sort of an issue, take on a 4-year-old mentality. They think like Cartman in South Park. You know, Cartman. Anyway, that's a terrible Cartman imitation. Anyway, they take on the Cartman mentality. Do you remember that episode of South Park where Cartman's mother has to buy Cartman a birthday present on everybody's birthday? So when Cartman goes to Stan's birthday party, Cartman has to get a present too. Because it's not fair that he gets a present and I do. Well, it's his special day. It's special for him. Can we celebrate that he gets something special? No, because if he gets something, then I gotta have it too. I don't get that mentality. I just don't. Look, I haven't been in Hall H in 5 years. I haven't been to a Star Wars Celebration in 10 years. It's different when, here's the thing, I would totally see things the other way, okay? If, let's say, you could make an argument that Kevin Feige, now listen, I think this is the key thing here, and I think this is the part that most people miss. A lot of people have their mentality based on this notion, or it seems to be based on the notion that Doctor Strange trailer was going to be released to the world, but they decided not to release it to the world because they're going to show it instead at D23. If that was the case, like if the studios like Marvel or Lucasfilm or whatever had material that they would have shown to the world, but we've decided not to show it to the world because we're just going to show it at D23 or we're just going to show it at Comic-Con. This is the key argument here. Pay attention to this. If that was the case, I would understand some frustration. I would understand some angst. But the fact of the matter is, when studios do have stuff they're ready to show to the world, like, say, the Star Wars trailer at Star Wars Celebration, yeah, they held it back to show it to the people in the auditorium first, but then they released it online fairly quickly after. You know, DC was always planning to show that Suicide Squad trailer that they showed at Comic-Con. They always planned that we are going to release this to the public, but we're just going to release it later. They ended up releasing it sooner. The Batman v Superman trailer, they always planned to release this to the public, but they held it, they were going to show it to the people at Comic-Con first, and then they released it to the public once they showed it to the people at Comic-Con first. And that's the way that it usually goes. When a studio is going to show something at Comic-Con or D23 or Star Wars Celebration that they are going to show to the rest of the world anyway, then yeah, they show it to the people in those auditoriums first, but then they release it to the general public. But in situations like that, Captain America Civil War, it's not really a trailer, it's just kind of hacked together footage, but we'll call it a trailer for argument's sake. For situations like at D23 when they showed the Captain America Civil War trailer, or they showed that Doctor Strange trailer, What people have to understand is that this was stuff, or the Jungle Book stuff that they showed at D23. This is stuff they never would have shown to the general public. So them showing it to the people at D23 did not prevent the rest of us from seeing it. We were never going to see it anyway. Like if you're watching this in New York and you couldn't get to D23, that's cool. But you can get to D23, that Doctor Strange footage they showed, well, if it wasn't for D23, they wouldn't have showed it to anybody. So you were never going to see it anyway. My wife, Anne, who didn't come to D23, she doesn't have to be upset or mad that because of D23, I didn't get to see the Doctor Strange footage. No, if it wasn't for D23, nobody would have seen it anyway. It was never going to be shown to the world. So even though there are some people at D23 who got to see it, them seeing it is not what prevented you from seeing it. You were never going to see it anyway. They were never going to show this footage to anyone. This never would have been put together. That Captain America hacked together sizzle trailer, that was something they never would have put together to show to the world anyway. So let me ask, so if I'm just some guy sitting at home and I didn't go to D23, should I have a right to get mad that they're not showing it to me? No, because I was never going to see it anyway. That footage was never going to be made. That footage was never going to be released to the public. D23 did not prevent me from seeing it. I was never going to see it anyway. And so, knowing that I was never going to see that D23 footage anyway, because they never would have released it even if there was no D23, then I have a choice. My attitude is, I have then a choice of my attitude. What's my attitude going to be? Is my attitude going to be, that is so cool that they put together something special for the people who did go to D23 and I get to hear about it? Or is my attitude going to be, well, if I didn't get to see it, nobody should get to see it. Those people who went to they shouldn't have got to see it. I know I was never going to see it anyway. This was something they were never going to release to the public. But if I don't get to see it, they shouldn't get to see it. No, we should be happy that the people who went, and be happy for them that they got to see something kind of cool. I just don't understand the mentality. I really don't. This isn't about whether you could afford, or I could afford to own a Ferrari, or we could afford to fly to Disneyland. It's not about that. If it's something they were going to show to the public anyway, it's going to come out. If it's something they weren't going to show to the public anyway, then you were never going to see it anyway. So there's a small group of people who did get to see it. Are we going to be bitter 4-year-olds who cross our arms and be mad about that? Or are we going to go, that's awesome for those people who got to go see it. Bravo. That's the mentality I choose to have every year at Comic-Con. I never go into Hall H. And whenever I hear about stuff that they did show in Hall H that they don't release to the public, I'm just happy for the people who stood in line, who did whatever they needed to do to get into Hall H to go see it. I'm happy for them. I don't take on this 4-year-old mentality of, if I don't get to see it, they shouldn't get to see it. It makes no logical sense. Anyway, and so that is kind of a mailbag question because a lot of people have been emailing me about that topic, and those are just my thoughts on it. By all means, it's leave your comments in the comment section below. Anyway, let's move on to the next item. And the next item up comes from Robert Ohlsson, who writes, "Hi, I was just wondering what happened to that Tarzan movie with Alexander Skarsgård in it. And what are your thoughts about it?" Well, thanks a lot for the question, Robert. And as some of you may know, the True Blood actor, Alexander Skarsgård, who is the son of the senior Skarsgård, who is in Thor and in the Marvel movies, a long time ago it was announced that he was going to be Tarzan in a Tarzan movie. And we haven't heard much about it since, and people are wondering, whatever happened to it? Well, I can tell you this. The movie's shot. It's done. They've finished shooting the movie. It was shot. And not only does it have Skarsgård in it, it also has Margot Robbie, who's, of course, in the upcoming Suicide Squad. And, of course, she was amazing in Wolf of Wall Street. It also has Samuel L. Jackson, and of course you know who Samuel L. Jackson is. It's also got one of my favorite actors, Djimon Hounsou, who appears in it as well. And they have finished production on the film. At least they finished the shooting stage. I think they're still in post-production on it. And I believe the storyline that they're following, if I remember reading this, because I looked it up a long time ago, but it's not like an origin story of Tarzan. It's not a story about the boy becoming orphaned in the jungle and raised by. What it does is, I believe, if I understood it right, and I could be wrong about this, if you guys have heard something different, let me know. But I believe the movie starts with Tarzan living in London. That, yeah, he was raised in the jungle and all that kind of stuff, but it starts with him later. It starts with him now living back in London, and he's acclimated to civilization. He's now living as a man in London, and then he gets drawn back to the jungle because of something going on at the jungle, and he has to go back to investigate something. And so I think, that's a really interesting sounding premise. I think that's a cool idea. Now, I believe the Christopher Lambert, the Lord of Greystoke, I think that was the name of his Tarzan movie. I think they kind of did a little bit of that as well. But to see a modern take on Tarzan, looking at Tarzan after the happily ever after of the traditional Tarzan story, and I'm not going to pretend to know the original novels. I don't. I never read the original Tarzan novels. But to me, from a cinematic point of view, I think this is a really cool and interesting sounding thing that they're doing. So there you go. The movie shot, it's in the can. It opens July 1st or July 8th, July 15th. Anyway, it opens early July in 2016. So it's coming out 1 year from now. It'll be in theaters. Keep your eyes open for it. Thanks a lot for the question. All right, now we move on to the next question. And the next question we have today comes from Joseph Stevens, who writes, "Hi, Collider crew. Love the show and watch it every day." Well, thank you so much, Joseph. My question is regarding the box office success of Star Wars The Force Awakens. It has been mentioned on the show before by John that the box office may be slightly hindered by the hatred of the prequels. But surely the love of the original trilogy and the return of the original cast members like Harrison Ford will bring nostalgia that will overcome that hatred for the prequels. Also, sequels to awful films have performed amazingly at the box office, such as the Transformers films. What are your thoughts? Thanks, and keep up the great work. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Joseph. And yeah, one of the things that I have said before was that what is going to hurt the new Star Wars films, not kill it, just hurt it, is the fact that a lot of people didn't like the prequels. They're coming off of bad movies. And that will hinder it a little bit. Now, you're asking a very valid question. Well, won't, just the love of the original trilogy and the fact that original cast coming back, isn't that going to overcome it? Yes, but it still doesn't change the fact that even though the love for the original trilogy is totally going to help, and the fact that the original cast is coming back is absolutely going to help, but it doesn't change the fact that I believe if the prequels were good films, however much money the new Star Wars movie makes, like when The Force Awakens opens, let's say it makes $150 million opening weekend. That's great. That's awesome. But it doesn't change the fact that if the prequels had been good movies, that instead of $150 million, it might have made $170 million, or it might have made $180 million. That's the thing. Even if Star Wars The Force Awakens opens to $220 million opening weekend, which I do not think it will, but let's say it did. Let's say it broke the all-time opening weekend box office record and made $220 million. I will still contend that it would have made $235 million or $245 million if the prequels had been good. I mean, let's just look at the prequels themselves. The first Star Wars prequel, The Phantom Menace, came out, and it made, get this, just domestically, not worldwide, domestically made $474 million domestically. $474 million. That's a number I can't even fathom. Worldwide, it made $1.02 billion. Now, this was before you had like $2 or $3 billion films every single year. This is going back a lot of years. It made a ton of cash. Tons of cash, right? 474 million domestically, 102 or 100.02, I'll just call it a billion. A billion worldwide. 474 domestic, a billion worldwide. Well, what did the second one make? Whereas the first one made 474 million worldwide, the second one made 310 million. Sorry, domestically. Whereas the first one made 474 million domestically, the second one made 310. Why? Because people didn't like the prequels. And so the first one made this much money, and the second one made this much money. Now, $310 million domestically is still an astoundingly successful number. But it dropped $160 million from the first one to the second one. And whereas the first one made $1 billion worldwide, the second one made $600 million and change worldwide. That's like a 40% drop. Why? Because interest in the films dropped like a stone because the first one was so poor. So while it was still amazingly successful because it's still Star Wars and people still love the originals, they still went out to see it. But it made $1 billion in the first one, like 640, 650 in the second one. Massive drop off. Now, those numbers went back up a little bit for Revenge of the Sith because it was the last film of the franchise. I believe the final one made like $800 and something million, still nowhere close to that $1 billion that the first one made. So that just goes to show that, it hurt it. The quality of those films hurt it because they should have made so much more. Whereas the first one made $1 billion. If it was great and people loved it, the second one would have made like $1.2 billion. And if people really liked and loved that one and it was good and high quality, the third one would have made like $1.4, $1.5 billion. But instead it did this instead of this. And I think we're going to get a little bit of after effect from that going into the new Star Wars movies. Maybe we won't feel it. Because maybe this new Force Awakens will make like $150 million opening weekend. So we won't feel it. It won't seem like there was effect. But believe me, underneath it, no matter how good the Force Awakens does opening weekend, it would have done a little bit better had the prequels been beloved. Anyway, that's just my theory on it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Young Phoenix. And Young Phoenix writes, is there ever going to be a $6 million man film? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Young Phoenix. And for those of you who know what he's talking about, there was an old, I think, 70s show. I think it goes back as early as the 70s. I don't even know if it was an 80s show. No, it must have been an 80s show. Anyway, the $6 million man. About this astronaut pilot, Steve Austin, who has a terrible accident while piloting a test flight of something. And they use technology that costs over $6 million to make him into this, like, borderline superhero, basically. Now, back in 2003, Jim Carrey was signed on to do a $6 billion man film. He signed on for it, and obviously with Jim Carrey signing on for it, it was going to be a comedy. Probably not in the likes of 21 Jump Street, probably something more silly than that. But for one reason or another, back in 2003, when Jim Carrey had signed on to $6 billion Man, that project never materialized, and it never took off, and it never took root. However, as of today, there is a $6 billion man in the works. There is a $6 billion man film right now in development. I don't know if it's been officially greenlit yet or not, but I know it's in development. Mark Wahlberg is signed on, or is attached, I should say, to star in it. And a guy he works with a lot, director Peter Berg. Peter Berg is attached to direct it. And so they've got a screenwriter on it. They're working on the story. It is in development. We will see if it ever actually gets a green light. But we are probably closer today now to getting a $6 billion man film. And from what I understand, the way they're working on the script is instead of Colonel Austin. Steve Rogers is Captain America. Colonel Austin, is that his last name? Colonel Austin. I think that's the name of the $6 million man. Anyway. In this movie, instead of him being a pilot, he's going to be a war vet. He's going to be a soldier who I believe gets injured in duty. And then they use technology to turn him into the $6 billion man. And I think ultimately this sounds like it's going to be a superhero story, really. It's going to be the origin story of a superhero. I think they're going to handle the $6 billion man more like a DC or Marvel superhero film. So let's see how that all turns out. All right, let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Manus. And Manus writes, hello, guys. I just wanted to ask a question about DreamWorks and how they have been unable to win the Oscar for Best Animated Film since Shrek, the first time the Academy introduced the category. In my opinion, last year, DreamWorks should have won, even though in reality, it should have been the Lego Movie, but for some reason, the Academy had their heads up their own asses. Anyway, I think that even when they should have won, Disney kicked them on the ground and laughed as they stole the win. Do you think they have a chance to win the award again? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Manus. And yeah, last year, the Lego Movie should have won the Academy Award for Best Animated Film. Should have won. The Academy gets it right 9.9 times out of 10. But this is one of those examples where they didn't get it right. I believe, personally, it's all subjective, but just my opinion. My opinion is that the Lego Movie should have won. And I remember watching the Academy Award nominee announcements, and Lego Movie didn't even get nominated. And I remember there has to be a mistake. There has to be a mistake. How did the Lego Movie not even get nominated? It was the best animated film of the year. How is it not even nominated? Anyway. So the Lego Movie wasn't going to win because it didn't even get nominated. And, How to Train Your Dragon 2, there was a very strong argument for How to Train Your Dragon 2 that maybe should have been considered for Best Picture, and it was nominated. But I got to tell you, I had no problem, actually, with Big Hero 6 winning. I adored Big Hero 6. I thought it was a terrific movie. I also adored How to Train Your Dragon 2. I thought it was a magnificent movie. And had How to Train Your Dragon 2 won for Best Animated Feature last year, I would have had no complaints. I would have been, I'm happy for How to Train Your Dragon. I thought the first How to Train Your Dragon was great. I thought the second How to Train Your Dragon was awesome. So I wouldn't have had a problem with it, even though I loved and adored Big Hero 6. But I loved Big Hero 6. And I think, I got no problem with it winning. So, no, absolutely. I do not think DreamWorks got robbed. Because, how can you say something was robbed unless it was clearly the favorite and clearly better than the other one? I don't think you can make an argument that How to Train Your Dragon 2 was head and shoulders and clearly better than Big Hero 6. I don't think that argument can be made. I thought they were very close. And I thought Big Hero 6 was fantastic. And now, the only other time, though, that I think DreamWorks had a legitimate chance to win, I love the first two Kung Fu Panda movies. Those ones surprised me. I didn't think I was going to like Kung Fu Panda at all. Really liked the first one, and I think I even liked the second one better. But I don't think those ever had a legitimate shot or a legitimate case to be made that they should win Best Animated Film of the Year. The only other time that I can think of that I think DreamWorks had a legitimate argument for one of their animated films to win Best Animated Film of the Year was back when How to Train Your Dragon 1 came out. Like Kung Fu Panda, How to Train Your Dragon was something that, the ads didn't impress me. I thought this is going to be a throwaway. It's a non-Pixar film, so it's going to be garbage, whatever. And I loved the original How to Train Your Dragon. I thought it was a wonderful story. It felt very Pixar-esque because they put story first in their animated film. A lot of animated films don't do that. And it was wonderful. And it was great. And it was nominated for Best Animated Picture. And it deserved to be nominated for Best Animated Picture. But here's the problem. How to Train Your Dragon 1 just so happened to come out the same year that a little movie called Toy Story 3 came out. And for my personal opinion, you may have a different belief, and that's cool. But I'm just saying, for me, I don't think there's much of an argument to be made that Toy Story 3 was indeed the best animated movie that year. It was one of the best movies of the year, animated or not. That movie's a freaking masterpiece. Who had a dry eye in the audience at the end of Toy Story 3? I had multiple times in that movie where I didn't cry. I'll admit, I didn't cry in Toy Story 3, but I had multiple times where I'm like I was getting choked up because of Toy Story 3. So I don't think you're going to find many people make an argument that How to Train Your Dragon 1 should have got the victory over Toy Story 3. I think it's going to be a very hard case to make. And like I said, it's all film subjective, so maybe you did prefer it, and that's awesome. But I think you're going to have a hard time finding a lot of people to agree with you on that. And so do I think, DreamWorks has been snubbed? No, I don't, because I can't look at any one year where I thought clearly the DreamWorks picture was the best animated film that year. I just personally can't find a year to do that. So that's just my opinion. Obviously, you have a little bit of a different opinion, and that's what makes being film fans great, is we can have different opinions on these things. All right, let's move on to the next question. And the next question comes to us from Nick Collins. And Nick Collins writes, Hey, Collider crew, loving the new show. My questions are in regards to the two Jungle Book films under production, The Jungle Book 2016 and The Jungle Book Origins in 2017. With all the positive feedback Favreau's Jungle Book is receiving following the D23 footage, it seems, for now, that this may be a potential hit. In the past, when two very similar movies such as White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen are released in close time frame, one is typically swept under the rug. Do you think 1 year is enough time for viewers to be ready for another movie that's essentially the same story, or that Jungle Book Origins could end up suffering from this financially? I'd also like to know, how do both studios get the rights to the film? Thanks, and keep it coming. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Nick. And let's start with the last part of your question. How did two different studios get the rights to do a Jungle Book movie? How is that possible? And here's how that works. It's because of something called public domain. Now, the original Jungle Book movie, I cannot remember exactly the year, but I think it might be as early as the 1800s, or anyways, before like 1920, is the original Jungle Book, the movie was written, or the original Jungle book was written, I should say. And that book, copyright on that book has now lapsed. There's law that says after a certain amount of time that something you created, it just becomes public domain. And that means anybody is free to use or draw from it for whatever reason. The idea of public domain is actually like a technology sort of thing. It's a law that is basically put out there to make sure that we as a society and a culture can build on what came before and not be overly hindered by copyrights. And actually, it's been taking a beating the last number of years. There is too much copyright law. There's way too much. There needs to be looser copyright law to allow stuff to go to the public domain earlier than 70 years so that creatives and technology and all that kind of stuff can build on what came before. We are hindering innovation with restrictive copyright laws. That needs to be. Copyright laws are good, don't get me wrong, and necessary. But how they relate to public domain needs to be loosened up a bit. But that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, the original book, The Jungle Book, is in the public domain. And this is a lot like how that one studio was able to make Oz the Great and Powerful a few years ago with James Franco. Even though, they're not the studio that made the original Wizard of Oz. Well, it's because there was a book called The Wizard of Oz, or it's called Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Anyway, it's something like that. It's from an original source material in a book that is now in the public domain. So here's what happens now. So Disney made an animated film, The Jungle Book. Many years ago, there was a classic, right? So now, Disney, with Jon Favreau, they can make another Jungle Book movie, and they can draw from that original book, and they can draw from that original animated film that they made. But what the Andy Serkis, and by the way, Andy Serkis, the guy who plays Gollum and the guy who plays Caesar in the Planet of the Apes, the motion capture genius, is going to be in The Force Awakens. He's directing that other Jungle Book movie, Jungle Book Origins. He is allowed to make a Jungle Book movie based on the original book and any new creative things they want to put to it. But what they cannot do is take stuff from the original animated film that wasn't in the book. So let's make an example here. Let's say that in the original book, there was no such thing as a character named Gus. I'm just making this up, okay? Just for argument's sake, okay? Let's say in the original Jungle Book, there is no character named Gus. Now let's say that original Disney animated film put in a character named Gus. All right? So now the Disney animated Jungle Book film, back whenever it was made in the 60s or something like that, it has a character named Gus in it, even though it's not in the original book. Now, here comes Andy Serkis making his version of the Jungle Book. He can make his version based on the book and anything new he wants to add to it as much as he wants, but he can't use that character Gus that Disney created for their version. Let's look back now at that Oz the Great and Powerful movie that was out a few years ago with James Franco, right? If I recall right, I think the ruby slippers, if I'm remembering it right, the ruby slippers were not a part of the original book of The Wizard of Oz. That was something that the studio put in their movie. So when Oz the Great and Powerful comes out, and it's a different studio, they can base their movie on anything that's in the original book, but they couldn't use ruby slippers because ruby slippers were something that was original to the movie, not in the book. And so that's how properties like The Jungle Book can be made by a studio because the original source material is in the public domain and they are free to use what is ever in the public domain and create their own mythology. What they cannot do, though, is borrow from other movies that are based on public domain material that created their own original material in it as well. You can't take that stuff, like the Ruby Slippers or like Gus, for example. So I hope that answers that. Now, whether or not the Jungle Book, Favreau's version, which is coming out next year, is going to hurt Andy Serkis's Jungle Book coming out in 2017, it really depends. I'm not sure, to be honest. Because there's two arguments to be made, right? On the one argument is the obvious one, which is, Favreau's Jungle Book comes out and everybody loves it, and then next year they see another Jungle Book movie coming out by a different studio, and people might say they're just copying, they're just ripping it off, it's going to be a poor man's version of the first one. That could absolutely happen. But another thing that might happen is, however likely this is or unlikely, people might go, wow, that Jungle Book, that was great. Oh, cool, another one's coming out. I want to see that take on it too. So it could hurt, it could help. I'm not really sure. I'm guessing it'll hurt it, but who knows? I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are. What do you think? Do you think Favreau's Jungle Book is going to hurt or help Andy Serkis's Jungle Book, which is coming out a year after it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. All right, a couple more questions left. Let's move on to this. And this one comes from Logan. And Logan writes, "Hey, Collider crew. My question is regarding the cliffhanger at the end of the first Incredibles." Okay, sorry, let me try that again. My question is regarding the cliffhanger that the first Incredibles left us on. We see the Underminer rise from the ground, posing a threat for the next movie. The only problem with this is there was a very popular video game that told the story that occurred with the new villain. So my question to you is that, do you think that The Incredibles 2 will follow up on the ending of the first Incredibles, or will it tell a new story? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Logan. And a couple things. Yeah, all of you guys remember the end of that first Incredibles movie. When the movie's done, all of a sudden the big machine comes up from the street, and then voiced by John... why am I forgetting John's last name? He does all the voices in all the Pixar movies. Anyway, when it comes up and the Underminer comes out, I am the Underminer. And then the movie just ends. I didn't feel that was a cliffhanger. I felt that was just a little extra, whatever. Ratzenberger, by the way, is John's last name. Thank you. I think it was just a little thing to show that now the Incredibles are moving on to fight other threats to the city. And it was also just a really good excuse to give us John Ratzenberger's voice, because John Ratzenberger has a voice in every single Pixar movie. And I love that. It's one of those little traditions that I just adore. So I never really felt that was a cliffhanger at all. Now, the other part of your question is, now in the Incredibles video game that came out, they go into the Underminer as the villain. So they tell that story. Yeah, but that's not canon. That's not continuity. And to be honest, the vast majority of people who saw The Incredibles never played that video game. So it doesn't really matter. So if they wanted to start The Incredibles 2 and have it be The Incredibles versus the Underminer and have it be a totally different story than the video game was, that's not a problem at all. But I don't think they're going to do that either, because remember, The Incredibles was 11 years ago. Oh my God, does that make you feel old? The Incredibles was 11 years ago. It was 2004. I think we're going to find The Incredibles not the day after the end of the first Incredibles movie. I think we're going to find The Incredibles at a different stage of their life now. And the Underminer incident is way behind them. And it really won't have any effect on it one way or the other. So, was the Underminer thing a cliffhanger? I don't personally think so. If they wanted to do the Underminer, would the fact that the Underminer story was in a video game cause confusion for people? No, it wouldn't, because, like I said, so few people actually played that game in relation to how many people actually saw The Incredibles. And number three, it wouldn't really make sense, because that original film was 11 years ago. I think we're going to find The Incredibles in a whole new stage of life. That's just my opinion, though. I'd be curious to know what you guys think. All right, 2 questions left. Let's start with this one. This one comes from Jan Pitascolo, and Jan writes, "Hey, Collider crew. A few days ago, Campy was at D23 and didn't talk about the Pirates of the Caribbean 5 presentation and didn't mention Will Turner coming back for the 5th installment of the franchise. What are your thoughts on Orlando Bloom returning? Thank you for an amazing show." Well, thanks a lot for the question, Jan. I appreciate it. Yeah, at D23, the live action presentation that I was at, there were 3 studios presenting. There was Marvel, there was Disney Pictures, and there was Lucasfilm, all owned by Disney. And honestly, I was shocked to say that the studio that did the best job was Disney Pictures. The Disney Pictures president came out and they knocked it out of the park. They showed us films like The Finest Hours, which looks great. They showed us glimpses at Pete's Dragon, which I think looks really interesting. They gave an amazing presentation on, we've talked a lot about it on the show, for the new Jungle Book film, which I kind of stole the show, kind of stole D23, was that Jungle Book presentation. And they showed a couple of others. They also gave us a glimpse of Pirates of the Caribbean 5. And Johnny Depp was there. This was kind of cool. Johnny Depp came out on stage as Captain Jack. He was in the full outfit and acting like Captain Jack. And that was fun. It was really fun. And I was tweeting out during D23 Live. And one of the things I tweeted out, it's official, Orlando Bloom is coming back to play Will Turner. But nothing about the Pirates presentation impressed me. That's just me. But I watched it and I'm like, meh. And remember, like, I hated the last few Transformers movies, but the Transformers new trailer looked great, and so I got excited about it. Turns out it was a bag of crap too. So it's not like I can't be impressed by a movie franchise that I didn't like the last one, because it's happened with the Transformers with me. But I saw the presentation for Pirates of the Caribbean 5, and honestly, there was nothing to talk about. There was nothing to write home about. And the return of Orlando Bloom, I think, is a mistake. I don't think Orlando Bloom is a good actor. He's just not. I mean, you take him out of Lord of the Rings, which he basically just had to do this. I sense a darkness. Ooh, it's so dark. You know, he basically had to do that. He wasn't great as Will Turner. And then when you see him in movies like The Three Musketeers, you see him in movies like Elizabethtown, which he was just awful in. You see him in movies like Troy or Kingdom of Heaven and things. And he has just not ever brought it. And it feels like Pirates of the Caribbean, they're aware, even though they've made lots and lots of money, the studio's aware people have not generally liked the last number of films they've put out. And it feels to me that now, okay, well, let's go back to something, but they're going back to something that isn't what made the first Pirates of the Caribbean great. You know, the Will Turner character, Orlando Bloom, was not what made the first Pirates of the Caribbean great. There are other elements that made it great that you guys have lost along the way. So it feels like they're reaching back to something that didn't make it great in the first place to put in the new ones to try to make it great again. So it's a confusing one to me. Look, always go into these things with an open mind. Orlando Bloom could come back for Pirates of the Caribbean 5 and just crush it and make that movie. It's possible. We have to allow ourselves that possibility. I'm just saying my advanced feelings on it are he's not a good actor. He's never been a good actor. I mean, he's a better actor than me, obviously, but I'm not the measuring stick, am I? He's not a good actor. And him coming back did nothing for me. Him coming back did nothing other than it's an interesting point. So I didn't really talk about it. I wanted to spend my time on Movie Talk talking about the things that did excite me from Disney's presentation. Pete's Dragon, The Jungle Book, The Finest Hours, all these other films that they're doing. That's what I want to spend my time talking about. So my personal opinion, I wasn't impressed, but maybe you are excited about it. And I think there are some people out there who are really excited about the notion that Orlando Bloom is coming back as Will Turner. And I hope it works out, man. I hope that we get in there and he saves it and he makes it awesome. And all we can do is hope. All right, time for the last question of the day. And the final question today comes to us from Romulo Malone, who writes, I heard that Tom Holland's Spider-Man will have 2 different Spider-Man suits in Marvel's Captain America Civil War. One, that Peter makes for himself, a homemade outfit, which I believe is the early wrestling Spider-Man costume, and another that Tony designs for him, the classic red and blue Spider-Man costume we all know and love. Do you think that Steve Rogers and S.H.I.E.L.D. should be the one to create Spidey's red and blue Avengers suit and Tony Stark make the Iron Spider armor in Civil War? Let me hear your thoughts. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Romulo. And first of all, can we just get rid of this Iron Spider outfit idea? I mean, where is this coming from? But the other thing to keep in mind is this. In these thoughts about, hey, he's going to have multiple costumes, maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. makes one for him, then Tony Stark makes one for him, you have to keep this in mind. Spider-Man's not going to be in much of this movie. They were already shooting for weeks when they finally cast Tom Holland. The movie had already been in production for weeks. And then he was only on set for a couple of weeks, and then he left. Tom Holland is now in Ireland, actually, shooting another movie called The Lost City of Z. He was only shooting for a couple of weeks, and now he's gone. While they were shooting Captain America Civil War for weeks before he ever showed up. And they're still shooting Captain America Civil War, but Tom Holland's gone. That means his role in this movie is going to be small. So I don't think you're going to get this big arching storyline of Spider-Man meets the Avengers and Captain America and S.H.I.E.L.D. make his suit for him, but then later on he gets seduced over to Tony Stark's side and Tony Stark develops a new type of suit for him. And no, he's not in the movie. Spider-Man is not a central figure in this movie. And I know for everybody who goes, but in the comic book he was. Well, I know in the comic book he was, but this isn't the comic book, is it? Days of Future Past was not the comic book, was it? Captain America's Winter Soldier was not the comic book, was it? Civil War will not be the comic book. They're going to take some themes and ideas from the original story, but then they're going to make their own original movie. That is what they have always done. That is what they will always continue to do. And even though Spider-Man is a very central figure in the comic version of Civil War, he is not going to be a central figure in Captain America Civil War. He's only on set for a couple of weeks and then he was gone. So he's going to have a couple of scenes. He's going to have something to do, I'm sure. He might even have something important to do in the movie. You don't have to be in the movie a long time to do something really important in the movie. So maybe he does something important, maybe he doesn't. I'm not really sure. Maybe they just use Civil War to introduce us to Spider-Man, to set up the upcoming Spider-Man reboot that Sony's doing, and then set him up bigger for, maybe Avengers: The Infinity War. And maybe that's where we'll get to see Spider-Man really do his stuff with the other characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But don't expect some big storyline with Spider-Man in this movie. He's going to not be in it that much. So he might have an important role, but it's going to be a small role, and he just wasn't there long enough to shoot anything else. Anyway, folks, that'll do it for us for this installment of Mailbag. Thanks so much for bearing with me. I know this show was almost an hour, so thanks for hanging in there with me. I really appreciate it. And look, guys, it's important to remember, anything I say on this show, unless I say it is now 3 o'clock, which is objective truth, you can't argue that. Everything I say on this show is strictly my opinion and strictly my thoughts, and everything about the movies is subjective. That means you are always going to have a slightly different opinion or a vastly different opinion than me, and that's what makes being film fans awesome, is that we can all have different perspectives and different points of views and different opinions. You're not definitely right, I'm not definitely wrong, or vice versa, or any sort of things like that. We all just have our experiences with the movies, and that's the best part. And that's why it's so important and so awesome for you to leave your thoughts and add to the conversation in the comments section below. It's incredibly valuable. It keeps the conversation. It introduces new thoughts and ideas, right or wrong, good or bad, whatever. It introduces new ideas to the conversation, and that's what's important. I also want to remind you guys, listen, if you are a big fan of the movies and television and entertainment, you should absolutely bookmark Collider.com. It is the best entertainment site on the web, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm associated with them now, but Steve Frosty Weintraub and his crack team of writers over there always do such an awesome job bringing great articles, breaking stories, things like that, and keeping us up to date on everything going on in the world of entertainment. And most importantly, guys, subscribe to this YouTube channel. It'll keep you up to date on everything going on in the world of Collider Video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. And follow me on Facebook and on Twitter, just at John Campia. And once again, guys, don't forget, we are launching our new recap show network. If you're interested in getting involved, you know somebody who might want to be involved, and you think you're qualified, please go to my social media, find out how you can get involved or write in, and I look forward to hearing from you guys. So that'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me for this installment of Collider Mailbag. I really appreciate you spending some of your weekend with me, and until next time, bye-bye.